everyone, it's Katie from Paradise Falls family. In this video we'll be taking you through our recent trip to Iceland in January 2023. We had the best time exploring this wonderful country. It took a lot of planning, so we'll talk you through what we did day by day, and then in the second half of the vlog we'll go through some of the more practical bits and what went into our planning. We'd done a trip to Lapland the previous winter, so we felt a bit more prepared for the weather this time, but being out on our own in such unforgiving weather was quite an experience, and it's definitely the kind of trip you want to be well prepared for, particularly going at this time of year. Iceland has been on our must-do trip list for quite a while, so we had a good idea of whereabouts we wanted to visit and what we wanted to see on our trip. We inquired with various tour providers, but in the end settled on booking everything independently, and I'll talk you through our choices here a little later. We decided on a 5-night road trip to try and fit everything in that we wanted to see. It was busy, but it was definitely worth it. Our trip began with a drive down to Luton Airport on New Year's Day. We took our time, arrived in the early evening and checked into the Holiday Inn right next to the airport. We had no trouble parking, and then after checking out our room we had a lovely tea in the hotel restaurant. We were travelling with our friends, making us a group of 4 adults and 4 children in all, and we met up with them later in the evening before getting a good night's sleep. The hotel itself was great, just what we needed, really comfortable and within walking distance of the airport. The room came with a double bed and a double sofa bed, which was fine for what we needed, and we'd definitely stay here again. Our flight the next day wasn't until around 2 p.m, so we had a relaxed morning and enjoyed a free breakfast in the hotel before we checked out. We'd booked our car into the long stay car park, so we dropped this off and got the shuttle bus to the airport. Our friends had booked into the mid-stay car park, which was also a great option. It was over the road from the hotel and just a short walk to the airport. We passed through the airport without any problems, and the flight with EasyJet over to Reykjavik only took around 2 hours 45 minutes and was probably one of the smoothest journeys we've ever had. Landing in Reykjavik, we were welcomed with lots and lots of beautiful snow, so much it was piled high at the side of the road and pavements. We'd booked a rental car with Go Car Rental, a local firm, and their office was just a short walk across the car park outside of the airport. It was only a 2-minute walk, but with luggage in deep snow it was a tricky experience. We rented a Mercedes-Benz Vito 4x4, which was big enough to accommodate all 8 of us, and I'll talk you through our choice of car later on. When we got there, the available car was actually a VW, but it was a great little van and we had no issues. We all piled in and headed off to Reykjavik. Although there was a considerable amount of snow, the roads had been kept pretty clear, so we made our way to the city centre with ease. After driving for around 45 minutes, we reached our hotel for the next 2 nights, the Foss Hotel Baron. There were lots of parking spaces, so we were able to park easily in front of the hotel. We quickly checked in, dumped our luggage and headed into the city to find some tea. Although the hotel is somewhat on the edge of the city near the water, Reykjavik is relatively small, so we found it easy to walk in and out of the city. We made the short 10-minute walk to Hallgrimskirkja. From now on I'll refer to this as the church to save my terrible pronunciation. And the kids enjoyed playing in the snow. Word of warning though, watch out for the massive icicles on the buildings lining the streets as you walk, as a couple ahead of us nearly got caught by one falling from the roof above. We spent some time marvelling at this wonderful building and getting some unforgettable photos. Then we wandered down Skogafoss, which you may recognise as the Rainbow Street. This is one of the main shopping streets in the city. We had tea at a Vietnamese restaurant near the bottom of this street and wandered back up to our hotel along another of the main streets in Reykjavik, window shopping along the way. Back at the hotel, we settled into our room, which was nice and spacious, if a little dated, and had a good night's sleep. Overall, I'd say we were pleased with our choice of hotel. Although not exactly upscale, it did the job. It was safe, clean, comfortable and spacious, and was in a good location by the water, so we'd recommend this to anyone coming to Reykjavik who wanted a standard 3-star option. The next day was our first full day, and we spent it driving and enjoying the Golden Circle. The Golden Circle is basically a driving loop inland from Reykjavik, which takes around 4 hours to drive without stops. You take in some of the best sights in Iceland and see some fantastic scenery. The Golden Circle primarily consists of 3 main sites: Thingvellier National Park, Geysir and Gullfoss. As sunrise wasn't until 11 a.m, we decided to have a slow morning, enjoyed breakfast at the hotel and stocked up on picnic food and snacks at the supermarket around the corner. We set off around 10 a.m, and driving out from Reykjavik it took around 45 minutes to reach Thingvellier, the first stop. Thingvellier is the site of Iceland's first parliament, and it's where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates meet. We arrived just before sunrise and were greeted by some spectacular views over the beautiful landscape. We spent maybe an hour exploring the area, playing in the snow and enjoying the views, and made the short walk downhill between the tectonic plates, which was a fantastic experience. There was plenty more to see and enjoy at the site, but we were conscious of the short amount of time of daylight at this time of year, so we jumped back in the car to head on to the next stop. It's worth noting that Thingvellier was one of the few places in Iceland where we struggled to park as it was so busy, although there was an overflow car park further along the road. It was also one of the few places where you had to pay for parking. This came to around £10. There's also a lovely visitor centre and probably the most scenic toilets you'll ever see. Our next stop was at Geysir, around 50 minutes along the road. We ate our sandwiches on the way and then we easily parked up and made the short walk over the road to the site. Although I believe the Great Geysir is currently dormant, there is another active geyser called Skogafoss at the site, which erupts every few minutes. Seeing this was one of our highlights of the trip and was just spectacular. We could have stayed here all day watching this erupt with the sun setting behind it. It was absolutely stunning. We made sure to keep an extra eye on the kids though, as the water is boiling, heated up from the volcanic activity below the surface. Again, there was a fantastic visitor centre, cafe and toilets available here to take a break, and having made use of these we got on our way for the short 10-minute drive to Gullfoss. By this time the sun was beginning to go down and it was getting colder, so we only had a quick walk down to the falls, which looked spectacular with the frozen water and ice mixed together. It's worth noting there are quite a few steps down to the lower viewing area, but it's well worth the effort for the views you get. After warming up in the gift shop, we jumped back in the car. At this point we had a choice over which way to go. We could have driven back the way we came, or we could carry on and complete the driving loop. Both are about the same time-wise, so we decided to carry on and try and stop at the Currid crater before the sunlight completely disappeared. We got there just as the sunlight was fading and made a quick stop. However, the water was frozen, meaning we couldn't see the usual vivid colours it gives off. It was also painfully cold by this point, so we only stopped for around 10 minutes before pressing on back to Reykjavik. In better conditions you can go down into the crater, but it just wasn't feasible this time for us. We made the decision to stop on the outskirts of Reykjavik in the Smáralind shopping centre to have some tea at TGI Fridays. Although not particularly inventive, we thought it was a safe option for the kids who were pretty tired by this point, and it was an easy and convenient stop off. We had planned to visit Saltkanerns, a town right next to Reykjavik, which had a good viewing point to try and see the Northern Lights. However, by this point the majority were tired, so wanted to head back into Reykjavik for a relaxed evening and an early night. The next day we were moving from our hotel onto Vik on the south coast, where would be our home for the next 2 nights. However, before leaving we spent the morning exploring Reykjavik a little more. We stocked up at the supermarket again before checking out of our hotel and wandering into the city to see a few more sights and do a bit of shopping. Reykjavik is really walkable, and we had a lovely morning exploring before we visited the famous church to take a look inside. You can also pay the small entrance fee to take the lift, or elevator as some of you may call it, to the top for spectacular views across the city. Something we'd really recommend. Watch out for the bell though, it's insanely loud when it goes off every 15 minutes. We then had one final thing on our list before leaving the city, Flyover Iceland. This is a simulated flight over Iceland, very similar to the Disney ride Soarin' for any of you who are familiar with this. We'd done the Flyover Canada ride when we visited Vancouver and thought the kids would enjoy this again. We all had a blast, and it was a good way to spend half an hour if you do have it spare. And with that we had to move on and leave Reykjavik to get down to Vik, which was around 2.5 hours away. We wished we'd maybe had a day more in Reykjavik to explore a little more, but we'd had a great time and it was time to move on and see some more of this beautiful country. The drive was really easy, straight down the ring road, Route 1. We headed straight into Vik as we had a reservation for the lava show at around 5 PM. This is one of the few things we'd pre-booked and something we really wanted to make sure we fit in. The show itself is the only one of its kind in the world where they actually recreate lava and you can see it in a really safe environment. It was absolutely brilliant and the kids said it was their highlight of the trip. If you're in the area, we suggest you make the time to stop in and take in a show. The show itself lasted around 50 minutes and then we headed down the road to the centre of the town to fill up the car with petrol and grab a quick tea at the Ice Cave Bistro, which is similar to a canteen. It was decent quality food, but it was quite expensive. With time pressing on, we were all getting a little weary, so we headed back out of town to the Mid-Hovel cottages, around 10 to 15 minutes back along the ring road. The cottages are part of a local farm, and although it's around 5 minutes drive off the main road, the owners had kept the road clear. This was probably the accommodation we were most unsure of beforehand, but we absolutely loved these cosy cottages. Ours had a double bed, a single bunk above this, and a double sofa bed. Each cabin comes with a kitchen area and a decent bathroom. They were lovely and warm and we were really comfortable here. Part of the reason we selected these was so we could get away from the lights and try and see the famous Northern Lights. Unfortunately, it was really cloudy the 2 nights we were there, so we didn't manage to see them on this occasion. One thing we'd note here is the farm does have dogs who love to play. The kids were apprehensive at first, but soon made friends with them and enjoyed playing. Something to keep in mind if you're not dog lovers yourself. Our third day was spent visiting the Jokulsarlon Glacier Lagoon. It's around 2.5 hours east of Vik. This was quite a big day trip, but one we specifically wanted to do if we could. We had breakfast and set off around 9 AM. The area east of Vik is vast, beautiful and largely uninhabited with only 1 or 2 small towns along the way. We made sure we had a full tank of petrol and plenty supplies before setting off. The lagoon itself was beautiful, with giant icebergs floating in the water and seals playing on the shore. We were able to park up and explore the lagoon for around 30 minutes before grabbing some fish and chips for lunch from one of the vans in the car park. There is also a small cafe and toilets on site, so we used these before heading out on our excursion, which we'd booked for 1 PM. We'd booked a tour of the ice caves out on the glacier through Viator, with Arctic Adventures and Southeast Iceland as the provider. We were already a large group of 8, so we had a private tour, and when we were taken out on the glacier by our tour guide Rainer in what was basically a monster truck, which the kids loved. This took maybe 30 minutes. We were then given hard hats and crampons before we made a short walk of around 10 minutes out onto the glacier and into the ice caves. The scenery was spectacular, and it only got better as we went down into the caves. The first was a smaller cave with tight spaces to squeeze through, which was really cool. The ice was beautiful and we had such a great time exploring. The second was a larger cave, and this is where we got to enjoy the blue ice and got some really great photos. We probably spent around an hour enjoying the caves before heading back to the lagoon. This tour was our personal highlight of the trip. It was absolutely brilliant. The sights were amazing, Rainer was a lovely tour guide, and we were the only group down in the caves as well. We'd highly recommend this tour, and I'll provide details later. I'll also point out that none of us struggled with the walk or the caves, so they were really accessible to all. Back at the lagoon, we spent some more time enjoying the views and getting some pictures. We then headed down the road to Diamond Beach. This is a black sand beach where smaller icebergs and chunks of ice wash down from the glacier and up onto the beach. The kids loved playing on the beach with the ice, and we spent around 20 minutes here exploring. With the daylight fading, we made one final stop just a minute down the road. There's a smaller car park where you can park and walk closer to the lagoon. It's quieter and you get better views of the icebergs and seals close up. We spent some time here before jumping back in the car for the journey back. The paths here were so icy though, so be careful. We all had plenty of slips and falls on this walk, and one of our group thought they'd broken their arm. I really wouldn't recommend this walk without crampons and proper equipment, but we live and we learn. The journey back to Vik was fine, if a little snowy. We'd kept a close eye on the weather all day to make sure we could get back okay, and I think we just missed the worst part of the snowstorm. Back in Vik, we had tea at the Strondin pub. It was a lovely place for tea and somewhere we'd definitely recommend. We then headed back to our cabin to play in the snow and get some well-earned rest. On our 4th and final full day, we were up early to pack up the car and get on our way. We hadn't managed to explore that much of the area around our cabin, so we headed down to Reynisfjara beach, or Black Sand Beach. There's a car park right next to the sand, so we parked up and headed down to explore. It was incredibly windy, and the area is renowned for large and rogue waves, so take note of the warning signs and keep back from the water. The scenery was beautiful. We could see the Didholla arch in the distance and got some great pictures of the basalt columns and in the caves. This is also where they filmed quite a bit for Game of Thrones, so it was really interesting to see if you're a fan. After maybe 30 minutes we had to get on our way as we had a reservation later in that day for the Blue Lagoon. The drive takes around 3 hours, but we wanted to make stops at Skogafoss and Seljalandsfoss waterfalls along the way. Both are just off Route 1, easy stops to make and well worth it. Both were spectacular and beautiful and a must-see if you're driving past. We also made a quick stop in Selfoss along the way, grabbing a Subway and Domino's lunch for the car. Again, quick and easy for the kids. We arrived at the Blue Lagoon around 3:30. We'd booked an arrival window of between 3 and 4 p.m, so it worked out perfectly. The facilities at the lagoon are fantastic, excellent changing rooms, and we spent 2 to 3 hours relaxing in the lagoon, which was just stunning. We took waterproof cases for our phones and got some great footage and pictures. The lagoon is much bigger than we were expecting. There is a bar on one side where the kids enjoyed getting slushies, and there are stations where you can get the famous face masks. Adults get a drink included, but you pay extra for more or if the kids want a drink. You can also pick from any drink for your free ones, alcohol included. The water was lovely and warm, around 38 degrees, so like a hot tub. We'd booked for 3 p.m. intentionally so we were able to experience the lagoon in daylight and darkness, which we enjoyed. After a good few hours, we reluctantly made our way out. The lagoon also has a cafe, restaurant, spa and hotel if you have longer, but we needed to get to the airport to check into our last hotel, the Convin Hotel at Geysir Vik Airport. Again, it was clean and comfortable and convenient for our flight early the next morning. The only thing I would say is that they hadn't cleared the car park, so this was the only occasion our car struggled in the snow, and the walls were a little thin, which made it noisy at times. We had tea in the hotel restaurant, which was lovely, and spent some time packing before getting some rest. The next morning it was really easy to drop off the car for the flight home from Geysir Vik Airport. The airport itself was really nice, it was really modern and had plenty of dining and shopping options. Again, this was one of the smoothest journeys we've done in terms of lack of queues and things running on time. It was a really nice way to finish what was a wonderful trip. So that was our trip, and now we'll take you through some of the more practical bits and what went into our planning. Firstly, our itinerary. We thought long and hard about this one. We started off with just a long city break in Reykjavik, but then decided we wanted to see more of the country. We then moved to the other extreme of, let's do the entire ring road. However, we decided this wasn't particularly wise in the middle of winter due to the possibility of adverse weather, and regardless, we just didn't have enough time. Therefore, it came down to which area of Iceland did we most want to see, the north or the south. We settled on the south and were really happy with our choice. However, in hindsight, we do think we were really lucky that our plans weren't impacted by the weather, as there were storms immediately before and after our trip, which if they'd occurred while we were there, would have seriously impacted our itinerary. Therefore, it's worth keeping this in mind when planning a winter trip in particular. This brings us to the weather. Iceland can experience really harsh weather, and as I said, we were quite lucky with the timing of this trip. We only experienced a few snowstorms and the roads were largely clear, so we were able to get around easily. However, it would have been quite possible for the roads to be closed and for us to be stuck in Vik, for example, which some of the locals had warned us of. In preparation, we made sure to download the Safe Travel app, which details the state of all of the key roads in Iceland, and we checked this regularly so we knew we were safe to drive. We also checked the weather on vendor.is several times a day to make sure we weren't going to get into difficulties or get stranded anywhere. As a side note, the phone signal throughout Iceland was brilliant, and we had 4G even in the most remote areas, which made keeping track of the weather and roads so much easier. As a backup, we made sure to pack lots of food for the car, supplies, changes of clothes, basic first aid kit, etc., just in case the worst happened and we were stuck anywhere for a length of time. Some of our drives were a long way from civilization, so we tried our best to be as prepared as possible. A big part of our plan to combat the weather was to get a really good car. We specifically wanted a 4x4 to cope with the snow with studded winter tyres. We checked all of the big name rental companies and they were really vague on what they would provide. Therefore, we decided to go with a local company and check some of the recommendations in our Lonely Planet travel guide. We settled on Go Car Rental as they offered cars meeting our specification for a reasonable price, and we were really happy with our choice. We'd recommend them to anyone and would definitely use them again. Moving on to the hotels, we spent a lot of time researching these and we needed to try and keep costs down. The hotels in Reykjavik, the Foss Hotel Baron, and at the airport, the Convin, were pretty standard, no frills hotels. They did the job for a night or two, were clean, comfortable, decent locations and for a good price. The accommodation options in and around Vik were more restricted with it being a smaller town, so we decided to try something a bit different to save money and book the mid-hovel cottages. These turned out to be our best accommodation choice and we really enjoyed staying here. To give you an idea of the prices, the Foss Hotel Baron cost around £150 per night, the mid-hovel cottages cost around £140 per night, and the Convin cost £170 a night, bringing our total accommodation spend to £750 for the trip. In terms of other costs, to give you a broad idea, our flights with EasyJet cost £440 for the four of us. This included seat reservations and 2 suitcases. The Luton Airport Holiday Inn was £50 and the airport parking was £60. Our car came to £1,100 in total, so £550 per family. The Ice Cave excursion was our most extravagant spend and was £480 per family, but we felt it was well worth it. This was booked through Viator and we've included the link below. Entry to the Blue Lagoon was £150 for a family of 4 and we booked this directly through their website. That price includes an upgrade to the premium package for me to get a robe and some extra face masks rather than just the standard one which was included. Kids under 13 are actually free, which was a nice touch. The lava show in Vik was around £110 and again we booked this directly through their website. Flyover Iceland was around £60, booked through their website using an offer they had on for kids to go free. And finally, the rest of our spending when we were there was just under £1,000. This covered all of our food, petrol, supermarket shops, souvenir and parking costs. Iceland isn't a particularly cheap place and we found we did spend a bit more than expected. It's also worth noting we took some cash with us just in case of emergency, but we didn't spend any of it as everywhere took credit cards. A quick note on food, as this is always tricky when travelling with kids. As you can tell from this vlog, we were able to stick to some pretty standard food, eating at Subway, TGI Fridays, Domino's, etc. We normally like to experience some of the local cuisine, but with the kids being so picky, these were great options. When we did eat at more local places, there was a good range of standard options if you wanted it, like fish and chips and burgers, but there was also plenty more interesting options if you wanted them too. We did find the food to be more expensive as we expected, particularly in the supermarket. When eating out, a meal for 4 was around £60 to £70, so a little bit more than in the UK. Looking at what we packed, we felt more prepared for this trip given we'd been to Lapland the previous year. However, we needed to buy our own ski suits and boots. We'd got some boots at Aldi for a good price and were able to buy the ski suits second-hand on Vinted for a really reasonable price. Then we packed similar to what we did for our Lapland trip. Lots of layers, non-cotton thermals, wool socks, gloves, hats, snuds, etc. Each day we wore multiple layers so we could add and remove as necessary and ensure we stayed warm throughout the day. It was painfully cold, as low as -16 degrees, so this was really important. We also packed hand warmers to give us a boost when needed, and we did use these a few times. Finally, is there anything we missed or would change? If we could do this trip again, we'd probably try and add an extra night in Reykjavik just to give us a bit more time to explore. It was quite a hectic holiday, which was great, but an extra night might have made it that bit more relaxing. There are some bits we would have liked to have done had we more time. For example, Perlan is an excellent science museum that we would have liked to have taken a look in. Whale watching was also on our list despite the time of year. The Om Nom Chocolate Museum sounded interesting, and we would have loved to have done a Northern Lights tour with a bit more time. We didn't do one of these when we visited Lapland, and we thought we'd see the lights from our cottage in Vik this time. We downloaded an app to help us find them, but the cloud cover was too much and couldn't see them. Therefore, we definitely need to book a proper tour next time we're this far north in winter. In terms of other excursions, there were a couple that we looked at, like snowmobiling on the glaciers, going down to the lava caves, or various other cool activities. There's so much we wanted to do, I can easily see us returning to Iceland in the future, perhaps in springtime though, to explore Reykjavik and the north of the country. So that's our winter trip to Iceland. We hope this was useful for your trip, and if you've got any other questions or tips, then just let me know in the comments below. We're planning loads more vlogs this year covering past and future trips, so make sure to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of our trips. Thank you so much for watching.